Oh, you're here. Good. I was hoping for company. You see, I've got stories, dark ones, chilling ones, the kind that keep you up at night. Mythical creatures, curses, horrors you can't escape. Shall we begin? Don't worry, I won't bite. Much.
I was 9 years old when my father died in the coal mine. I remember that day vividly. The sky was a heavy, suffocating gray, as if a giant mountain of coal was pressing down on us. The air smelled thick of damp soot. Villagers gathered outside our house, whispering among themselves, occasionally sneaking glances inside. My mother was kneeling on the ground, clutching a crumpled death certificate in her hands, crying so hard her voice had gone hoarse. A few men from the mine stood beside her, looking uneasy. One of them, dressed in a dusty gray uniform, reached out and patted her shoulder, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Mrs. Fan, I'm so sorry. The mine. Sigh." My mother didn't respond. She just gripped that piece of paper tighter, her fingers turning pale, as if trying to crush it with sheer willpower. I stood frozen in the corner, watching everything unfold in confusion. The world of adults was too complicated, too overwhelming. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I knelt beside my mother and cried my heart out. Someone in the crowd suddenly spoke. "Where's Lee?" "Quit his job," another man answered. "He couldn't handle it. Left without a word." Uncle Lee, my father's best friend. He was well known in the mine as a good, honest man. Growing up, I often ran to the mine looking for my dad. If he was busy, Uncle Lee would scoop me up onto his shoulders, carrying me around while I giggled. He didn't talk much, always the quiet type, but he had a kind heart. He would carve little animal figurines out of discarded coal rocks for us kids. He'd help my dad with tools and always be the first to carry injured miners out whenever there was an accident. But this time, when my father died, he didn't even show up to the funeral. With my father's ashes, we left the mining town and returned to my mother's hometown, Chengdu. She used the compensation money to rent a small apartment and open a tiny grocery store at the street corner. Life wasn't easy, but it was stable. More stable than the unpredictable life back in the mine. I never expected that our next-door neighbor would be Uncle Lee. What were the chances? After the accident, I'd heard he had left his job and disappeared. I thought he had gone back to his hometown, but now he had somehow ended up right next to us, as if fate had deliberately arranged this reunion. When he first saw me, he looked startled for a second, but then he smiled warmly. "Xiaofan, you've grown so much." I stared at him, hesitating before asking, "Uncle Lee, why are you here?" He scratched his head awkwardly, chuckling. "I needed work. Happened to find this place, so I rented it." I didn't question him further. I was still just a kid at the time, but something inside me didn't sit right. As time passed, I started noticing things. He was too good to us. He helped my mother with her store, carried heavy deliveries inside, fixed broken shelves, even changed the light bulbs in our apartment. The way he and my mother interacted, it was too smooth, too natural, as if they had already gotten used to being around each other. Sometimes he would come over for dinner, bringing a plate of braised pork or soup. He would casually say he made extra and didn't want it to go to waste. They kept a polite distance, never touching, but there was something in their eyes, a silent understanding, a connection they thought I wouldn't notice. I was 12 then. Maybe I didn't fully understand adult relationships, but I could feel it. something had changed. Something was happening between them. And then there was his wife. Uncle Lee's wife visited from time to time. She was a quiet woman, always bringing homemade food, preserved pork, pickled vegetables, braised duck, packed neatly into 2 large boxes. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words were brief, emotionless. Her face was always expressionless, except for the occasional faint smile directed at me, a smile that held no warmth. Her eyes scared me. She wasn't hostile, but there was something about her that made me uneasy. She and my mother maintained a delicate politeness. They would exchange a few words, but there was no real closeness between them. The air was always strangely heavy when she was around, as if there were too many unspoken words lingering in the room. One day, in a casual conversation, my mother told me something that sent a chill down my spine. That woman, she was in prison when she was younger. I froze. What? Self-defense. She stabbed a man to death. I stared at my mother, unable to process what I just heard. She was assaulted in her village, fought back, and ended up serving 5 years. After that, no one wanted to marry her. And she can't have kids? My mother sighed. She was badly beaten before she went to prison. That's what people say. I couldn't believe it. The quiet, expressionless woman who always brought us food. She had killed someone. Did she know? Did she know what was going on between Uncle Lee and my mother? Did she care? Or worse, did she simply accept it, knowing there was nothing she could do? The more I thought about it, the more it scared me. I started secretly watching my mother, watching Uncle Lee, studying every interaction, looking for signs, for proof. But as I dug deeper, I realized something even more terrifying. It wasn't just about their relationship. It was about my father. By the time I turned 16, things had settled into a routine. Uncle Lee spent most of his time at our grocery store, helping out whenever he wasn't working his delivery job. To outsiders, they were just neighbors. But to me, they were like a married couple, always together, moving in sync, understanding each other without words. At night, though, they still returned to their own homes, as if keeping up some kind of act for my sake. I started connecting the dots. My father's death. It was too sudden. After his funeral, we had briefly stayed with my grandmother before coming to Chengdu. And somehow, Uncle Lee had already rented his apartment before we even arrived. Did he know we were coming? Had they planned this all along? And if he really saw my father as a brother, why did he disappear right after my father died? Then there was the money. I secretly checked my mother's old bank records. The mine had paid 300,000 yuan in compensation. But when I checked her account, she only had 200,000 yuan left. She had spent some of it on the grocery store. But what about the rest? Did Uncle Lee take the money? Did they kill my father for it? That idea consumed me. I tore through old letters between my mother and grandmother. I reread the medical reports from my father's accident over and over. I had to find something, anything, that would expose the truth. I was so sure of it. My mother and Uncle Lee had murdered my father, and if no one else was going to find the truth, then I would. I decided to return to the mine. I was going to find out what really happened. I lied to my mother, saying I wanted to visit my grandmother. She didn't suspect anything and handed me some money, reminding me to take care of myself. The journey from Chengdu to the mining town was long. A train ride, then a long-haul bus. I spent most of the trip staring out the window as the scenery grew more desolate. Bare mountains stretched across the horizon, and scattered villages appeared like forgotten remnants of the past. By the time I arrived at the mining town, the sky was already dark. The air smelled the same, thick with coal dust, dry and heavy. It brought back childhood memories, though now they felt distant and eerie. The mine was still in operation, but many of the old workers had long since left. I searched for familiar faces, and finally, an elderly man with deep wrinkles recognized me. "You're old fans, boy?" His voice was hoarse, his gaze filled with nostalgia. "Yeah, it's me." His expression softened, then turned sorrowful. He sighed deeply. "Your father was a good man." Hearing those words again, I felt something tighten in my chest. They took me to see the remaining workers who had known my father. The moment they saw me, their faces lit up with recognition. "Old Fans Kid is back," someone suggested a gathering. They were eager to reminisce, and for the first time in a long while, I felt warmth in this place. That evening, as we sat together, they told me about my father's final day. It wasn't even his shift that day. "No?" I frowned. "Then why was he in the mine?" "He volunteered, said he needed the extra pay for the family. And then the collapse happened." "Yeah, it was sudden, no warning." A younger worker added, "Your dad was right in the danger zone. The first thing he did was push others out." I listened, my heart pounding. Why was he there when it wasn't his shift? Why did the collapse happen exactly where he was standing? Was it really an accident? I had to know more. That night, an elderly woman, one of the miners' wives, offered me a spare bed. I accepted, my mind too restless to refuse. The truth was close. I could feel it. The next morning, I went looking for Lou, the former foreman. He wasn't working in the mine anymore. He had taken a job at the cafeteria, managing supplies. When he saw me, he was visibly startled. He squinted for a moment, then sighed. "You look just like him." I skipped the small talk. I had no patience for it. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Lou hesitated. He looked at me carefully, as if weighing whether he should say anything at all. Then he asked, "Your mother? She never told you?" Something inside me twisted. "Told me what?" My palms felt sweaty. Lou stayed silent for a long time. Then he lowered his voice. "Your father, he made a choice." "A choice? What are you talking about?" Lou exhaled deeply, rubbing his hands together. His voice was quieter now, almost as if he was afraid someone else might overhear. "Your father was sick, son. Late-stage lung disease. He knew he didn't have much time left." I felt something crack inside me. "No, that's not true." Lou nodded grimly. "He came to me, said if he just died of illness, your family would get nothing. But if he died in the mine, it would be classified as a workplace accident. You and your mother would get compensation." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "No." I shook my head. "He wouldn't." He spent days studying the mine's layout. He found a weak spot, loosened the support beams just enough to make it unstable. Then, when the time was right, he went down. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. He made sure the others got out first. Then, when he was the last one left, the collapse happened. Lou let out a bitter chuckle. He was smart. He knew how to make it look like an accident. My world was crumbling. All these years, I had thought my father was murdered. I had spent so much time convincing myself that my mother and Uncle Lee had conspired against him. But the truth was even crueler. My father chose to die. For us. I don't remember much after that. I must have passed out, because when I woke up, it was already evening. The room was dim, and several of the workers had gathered around. "Damn it, Liu, why did you tell him?" someone muttered. Another worker spoke softly. "Kid, don't blame your mother. And don't blame Li either. Your father told Li to take care of you and your mom before he died." I closed my eyes, my throat aching. So that's why Uncle Li had been there all along. Not because he wanted to take something from us, but because my father had asked him to. The next morning, I boarded the long-distance bus back to Chengdu. Rain fell lightly against the window, drumming a soft, steady rhythm. I kept seeing my father's face in my mind. What had he been thinking in his final moments? Did he regret it? Would he have done things differently if he had more time? He turned himself into a payout to make sure we could survive. That was his sacrifice. That was his choice. The poor don't get choices, not really. The only thing he could do was control how he left. And I would have to live with that. When I got home, my mother was sitting behind the counter of the store, checking receipts. She looked up. "Back already?" I stared at her. My chest was tight. She glanced at me again, noticing something in my expression. She didn't ask. Instead, she lowered her head and continued sorting through the receipts. Then, after a long pause, she murmured, "You went there, didn't you?" I didn't answer. She sighed softly. "He told me not to tell you." My hands clenched. My throat was dry. "Why? Why did he do it?" She finally met my gaze. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "Because he didn't want you to suffer." I broke down. I collapsed into my mother's arms, sobbing like I hadn't in years. Life continued. Uncle Li still helped at the store. My mother still ran her business. His wife still visited from time to time, bringing homemade food. Nothing changed. But I had changed. I no longer looked at them with suspicion. I no longer held on to my childish idea of right and wrong. There was no black and white in this world. Just choices. Just survival. Years later, I was accepted into a university in Beijing. On the day of my departure, my mother and Uncle Li took me to the train station. She patted my shoulder. "Call when you arrive." Uncle Li nodded, handing me a bag full of snacks. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. As the train pulled away, I looked back and saw them standing there. Then, suddenly, I remembered. My father's broad back, carrying me through the mining town. His voice deep and reassuring. "Xiaofan, life is hard, but you have to live well." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall. So this is life.